Hello, I'm Robin Ince.
And I'm Brian Cox.
And welcome to the podcast version of The Infinite Monkey Cage, which contains extra material that wasn't considered good enough for the radio. Enjoy it.
Hello, I'm Brian Cox.
And I'm Robin Ince, and this is The Infinite Monkey Cage.
The show described by one disgruntled blogger as one of those shows that thinks you can prove anything with facts and evidence.
Genuinely true.
And presented by someone described as so-called professor.
Brian Cox. So, and he is, by the way, just so you know, he is so-called Professor Brian Cox because he is Professor. And as you probably realise already, he is very much the brains of the operation, while I'm the not
the
brains.
John Peel impersonator.
Well, I'd say I'm the not brains, really, of the operation. That's my main job.
Then.
I can do Mr. Magoo being Richard Feynman. I got a friend who's an artist and sometimes says something I don't agree with too well. He says, as an artist, when I see a flower, yeah, there we go. That's not the flower at all. Yeah.
Seamlessly got out of that.
Today, in fact, even though I am the not brains, by the way, I just have to quickly tell you this. Just after the last series that we did, I did go and have a brain scan, which was worrying because I genuinely thought, what if it does turn out that I haven't got one? But as long as I didn't know, it was fine. But on the active observation, kind of a Schrodinger's brain system. And afterwards, I found out that the woman doing the brain scan, this is the only time it's ever happened to me, apparently halfway through the scan, she went, "Oh my God, his brain's so big, I'm not sure I can fit it all in," and then blushed. And that is the only time anything about me has ever made a woman blush. And it turns out I have quite a big occipital lobe. I look at a lot of things. And I'm not showing off, by the way, about having a big brain, because as we know, brain size within a certain range, it doesn't really make much difference. Einstein had a smaller brain than me, but I reckon had the intellectual edge. So, anyway, today we received a memo from the BBC Deputy Assistant Science Facilitator Modulating Ombudsman saying that Brian has been confusing people with his particle physics speech, such as...
Asymptotic freedom!
And... could we target a broader demographic who enjoy scary things and contemporary dance? So...
How many more of these have you got, Robin? Can you just get them all out of the way now?
Oh, no, they're going to be scattered through, Mr. Tango Man. So, today's show is called, quite simply, Nature's Most Frightening Things. Cha-cha-cha.
Actually, that's almost true. Today we're looking for nature's most deadly animal.
Is it sharks?
No.
Oh.
Why is it that at times we seem to be petrified of the innocuous and unaware of the truly deadly? What are the most astounding and ingenious methods of survival that have evolved by the process of mutation, heredity, and natural selection?
We are joined by two people who, for some insane reason, constantly confront a barrage of fanged, stinging, poisonous, toxic, deadly creatures, and a comedian who sometimes gives Sandy Toxfig a piggyback. And they are...
My name's Steve Backshaw. I am a naturalist, and my favourite toxin is dendrobatotoxin, which occurs from the skin secretions of poison dart frogs, and in one particular species, Phyllobites terribilis, which is no bigger than the end of my thumb. It's said to have enough poison in one frog to kill 10 people.
But let's see what else you can win.
Hello, my name's Lucy Cook, and I'm a broadcaster and zoologist, and my favourite toxin is the one produced by the slow loris from its elbows, because I think it'd be really cool to have poisonous elbows, particularly on the tube.
Good evening, my name is Andy Hamilton from Fulham, London, England. And my favourite toxin... Actually, I don't like to choose a favourite toxin because I find it causes resentment among the other toxins. But if I had to choose, I think I would go for cyanide because it smells of almonds, which means that Poirot can always smell it. Cyanide is a toxin, is it? Yeah. Broadly speaking, it's a toxin, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's a poison, not a venom, which is...
No.
Don't worry, Steve. We'll be dealing with the old toxic venom conundrums in a moment. But let's first say, and this is our panel.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, we'll start with you. And first of all, obviously, this show has actually been pre-recorded by some months, so congratulations on winning Strictly Come Dancing. coming third in Strictly Come Dancing, coming fifth, and being knocked out in the first round. So one of those will work in the edit. What is this is the only thing I'm going to ask about the dance competition, but what is the difference between the feeling of fear, where, you know, when I watch you on television and you are approaching, you know, taipan snake, it's certainly one of the most poisonous snakes, the difference between that and then the going in front of people and dancing, you know, which one actually makes you feel more nervous and more nauseous?
It sounds absolutely ludicrous, but there's no comparison. It's the dancing by a mile. I'm far, far less nervous swimming out of a cage alongside a great white shark than I am going under a spotlight doing something at which I am absolutely terrible, knowing that at least 10 million people are watching. You're just so completely exposed. Not that I'm doing it naked, although, to be honest, not far off in some of the outfits.
So, I mean, out of a cage with a great white, it is a dangerous thing, isn't it? Because I've swum in a cage with the great white and it attacked the cage.
It depends very much on the situation. So there's one particular place in Guadalupe in Mexico where the water clarity is extraordinary. You can see the sharks from a very long way away. You can assess their behaviour. And there are certain things about the posture that a shark will take on that will allow you to tell whether it's basically in an aggressive mood. If it has an arched back, if it has the pectoral fins drop down low, the gills billowing, the mouth open, and the movements are angular, then it's ready and raring for action, and you stay in the cage. If, on the other hand, you've got a shark that's gliding along with the pectoral fins spread wide like wings, it's just kind of moving around, checking out its environment. It's not interested in attacking. And I've spent hundreds of hours in the water with sharks now, and you can tell pretty much 100% which ones are the ones that you have to be worried about and which aren't.
What if you meet a very clever shark
That's got...
who listens to Radio 4? He's going to suss you out next time, isn't he? He's going to glide past looking disinterested, and then... that'll be it, Steve.
Well, if the next time I'm back here and I only have one arm, Andy, then that's probably why.
Are all these things true that you hear? I mean, when I swam with them, they said, well, you can punch them on the nose. They don't like that. You can get, and it's easier said than done with the great white, I suppose. But also you can move. They don't change direction very quickly, do they, once they start coming at you?
It depends on the species. Great whites certainly do not have the ability to turn completely around and sort of go backwards like, for example, a lemon shark does. It's much more manoeuvrable. They do. You're absolutely right. The whole thing about punching on the snout is not an urban myth. They have these incredibly highly sensitive pores in the snout called the ampullae of Lorenzini, which are filled with a gel which makes them incredibly sensitive to electrical signals and allow them to sense the moving muscles of their prey. But it does mean that their snout is phenomenally sensitive, so much so that in some species, by tickling or rubbing the snout, you can put the shark into a kind of torpor, of stupor, and they'll pretty much go to sleep. It's called tonic immobility. And you can flip a shark over and it will just lie there going, oh, that feels so good. That just feels amazing. It is literally like having a Labrador puppy that's lying there, enjoying it so much that it's just totally transfixed.
Have you used that on Strictly?
See, that's what we need. Is if you could be a cage dancer with the sharks, then I think that could be the worst of all worlds. Lucy, you obviously also work with animals which are toxic, venomous, etc. Now, when we started talking about the idea of doing the most dangerous animal on Earth show, a lot of people went, well, isn't the most dangerous animal human beings? So how do you feel when people do say, are we the most dangerous animal?
Yes. Short answer, but yeah, no, we are. There was a recent survey that came out in the last 40 years. We've managed to kill 50% of all species. Although all 50% of all species have died out. So, you know, that's really just down to us and what we've done. So that probably means that we are the most deadly of all animals. I think killing other animals that have killed other humans, the mosquito is the most deadly of all animals. And then we come second. But then if you included all the other animals that are out there potentially to be killed, we've done pretty well. We've done better than mosquitoes.
So the mosquito, so that's malaria?
Yeah, malaria and dengue fever, which a friend of mine in the audience has had recently. And it was great, wasn't it?
Don't try and leave.
And a whole host of other really nasty things. Mosquitoes are almost as nasty as us, but not quite.
So in many ways, we're the winner. I love the way your jolly voice there. A friend of mine who had dengue fever just said there, give us away, still not that well.
Her internal organs were bleeding, actually, yeah.
Yeah, you've got a very jolly way. It's very rare we see that in Casualty. Her internal organs are bleeding.
Anyway. Steve, you must have had all sorts of diseases like that. I always find it... I don't like filming in jungles and things like that, but that's where the animals live usually, isn't it?
Yeah.
Rainforest.
It is. We do spend an enormous amount of time in rainforest environments for just the reason that it is the most biodiverse environment on the planet. And if we don't find the jaguar or the harpy eagle that we've set out to find, we're almost certainly going to find something else, whether it's an intriguing frog or a snake or something. But it is also the place where you have the highest density of pathogens and parasites. And you pretty much always come back with something, whether it's a botfly larvae living in your head.
You had one of those, Steve.
One of my cameramen had 69 infest him. I can't remember why I'm so sort of precise about the number, but it was exactly 69. And he was on his own. He was infected with all these botflies. There's several different kind of botflies, but they're usually quite large. And the particular species, this one, will catch smaller flies, lay its eggs onto the smaller fly's legs. That smaller fly will then land on a large warm-blooded mammal, and the second it lands, the eggs hatch out and the larvae crawl down the legs and bury into the skin of the larger animal. It's instantaneous. It's an extraordinary thing. And then they grow, they feed on the flesh of their host, and eventually they drop out, they pupate, and they turn into an adult fly again. But for that period of time that they're in your skin, it is the most intensely painful, irritating, itching sensation. He said he could hear them at night scratching inside his head. And then he said that he got himself a bottle of rum, drank the entire thing, and just waited for death to take him. And then, out of the forest came a shaman who covered him in ointment, which popped all of the botflies out, and he survived. It's a great story.
So Andy, do you still regret not going into nature documentaries?
Does this show go out at tea time? It does, doesn't it? I think, that's pretty horrific. I was just thinking it's a bit unfair to label the mosquitoes as deadly, though, doesn't it? Because deadly sort of carries that overtone of intent, doesn't it? I mean, human beings we've probably, a lot of the exterminating of species has happened because we've killed them and eaten them or done something like that. But, of course, the mosquito has no idea we even exist. I mean, he's just taking blood because they need the blood. Is it the female, isn't it? It's the female mosquito.
That's right. It's the females. There's about 3,500 different species of mosquitoes. The majority of them are of no harm whatsoever to us. They don't drink blood. And the males, as adults, don't drink blood either. They usually lap nectar, and they're quite important as pollinators. But the females, particularly of the Aedes and the Anopheles mosquitoes, will take a drink of blood before they're ready to basically lay their eggs. It's a protein feast.
But it's still not their fault, though. Just before there's this woman bashing that's going on.
Yeah.
I feel it's the only woman on the panel that need to sort of stand up. It's not the female mosquito isn't doing it intentionally, obviously.
It's a vampire.
No, she's been infected by Plasmodium and all sorts of other nasties.
Oh, it's so easy to blame the Plasmodium.
Yeah.
Do you know what? That is the really interesting bit, though, because Plasmodium is this tiny single-celled organism that has no brain, and yet it has the ability to fundamentally alter the behaviour of the mosquito to make the transmission of Plasmodium more effective. So when a mosquito bites you, in its saliva it has an enzyme called aparase, which thins your blood, and it makes it easier for it to drink, for the blood to keep flowing into its system. But when it's infected with a malarial parasite, it goes straight to the salivary glands and it shuts off the flow of aparase, which means that each female mosquito has to visit at least twice as many hosts to get the same blood meal. So that parasite has completely altered the behaviour of the mosquito so that it goes around, it bites more people or more mammal hosts, and therefore spreads the disease more effectively. And throughout the natural world, you find instances of how parasites, which are not sentient beings, can completely alter the way their hosts behave. And it has been such an important way in the way the whole natural world has kind of moved forward, really. The whole evolutionary arms race that we are basically a part of has very much been driven by that relationship between parasite and host.
So we wouldn't exist.
Lucy, we should ask you, because Steve has obviously nearly died hundreds of times with these things, and parasites and sharks. And well, in your experience, your filming experience, or your field experience, what are the nastiest things you've encountered?
Well, I nearly, sort of ironically, I nearly died because I loved an animal too much, which was sort of, slightly unexpected, because I really love frogs. Somebody's got to, and I really love frogs. And I went to Colombia to look for the frog, to look for Phyllobates terribilis, which is the world's most toxic animal, which is this little banana yellow frog. It's about 1.5 inches long. And it is so toxic that it can kill 10 men. And it sweats out this toxin out of its skin that's the fastest acting neurotoxin that's known. It will kill, one frog could kill 2 bull elephants in 3 minutes flat, and there's no antidote whatsoever.
They've actually done that?
Yeah.
What a terrible bit of vivisection that was.
Yeah. Anyway, so we went to go and look for this, and it was a massive, great big mission to get there because it's in the wild west of Colombia, which is seriously wild and dangerous. And we had to go past the front line and guys with machine guns, and I had to sign away my life. And the whole thing was very scary indeed. And then we got into the jungle, and we found the frog, and I had to wear protective gloves because if you just touched it with your fingers, and the toxin could get into your fingers, and obviously if you touched your face, then, you know, you'd be dead 3 minutes. And it's one of those cheery poisons that shuts down all your nerves and everything. So for the last minute, you appear to be dead, but you're actually still alive, silently screaming inside. I'm still alive, save me! But everybody thinks you're dead at that stage.
I've done gigs like that.
Yeah. So we go there and we find the frog, and I'm just like, it's just amazing. I've been on this massive journey and I've wanted all my life to see this animal, and I've got my plastic gloves on, but still I'm literally just shaking because it's like holding a loaded gun, and the thing hops, obviously. So everywhere I point it, everybody's like moving away. And I'm just like, I'm talking about it, and then sometimes I get overwhelmed by the amazingness of evolution and how wonderful and fantastic thing it is, and I burst into tears. And I went to wipe the tears away from my eye, and my entire crew went, "Stop!" And so, yeah, I nearly did it. And it was nearly death by frog, which would have been so awful. And so lots of schadenfreude, I think, from people that know me and don't really like me very much. I go, yeah, she died, loved it too much.
Were you doing research into this? Do we have any idea why that frog is so...
Malice.
Yeah. No, it's as Steve was saying, it's an evolutionary arms race, basically. It's a freak. It's a total freak, because you're absolutely right. It does not need to be that poisonous. There's no need for it to be so poisonous. But its nemesis is this snake, which is the only thing on this planet, other than the frog itself, that can tolerate the toxin that it sweats out. And so,
how unlucky is that? You're the one predator.
And so they've been over millennia, they've been in this evolutionary arms race of predator and prey, getting more and more poisonous.
We should elaborate a bit on that, because it's an interesting example of evolution. So there's a small area, presumably, where these two, the predator and the prey, are operating.
So it's only the size of Washington State. That's the size of the place where you find the frog. It's a tiny area. And it's the original poison dart frog. There are lots of frogs that are called poison dart frogs, but this is the only one that the Embera Indians actually use to poison their darts. And if they use it on their darts, the darts will still kill a jaguar after 3 years. It's that potent, yeah. And I met the guy. I met the Embera. I met one of the guys who makes the blow guns, and I said to him, "God, just these darts lying around. That's a bit dangerous, isn't it? Have you ever had any accidents?" And he goes, "Yeah, no, we have actually. My uncle actually. He was shooting parrots in a fruit tree, as you do, and he shot the dart up, and it came back down, and it shot him in the shoulder, and 3 minutes later, he was dead." And he said, and it was around the time, it was about 10 years ago, that guns were appearing in the area, so we switched from blowpipes to guns because they were safer.
But it's going to seem like a silly question, because you could almost say, well, this snake, it's a particular species of snake that only preys on these frogs. And obviously, so it's been driven to the frog tries to defend itself. It will poison a few of the snakes. The ones that are immune will breed, and there you go. But why didn't the snake just eat a different frog?
Well, because the different frog probably exudes a different poison that it isn't tolerant to.
Right,
but
so it's just that's what that snake eats.
Yeah. The really clever thing about this frog, one of the things about the really clever thing about the frog is that it doesn't actually make the toxins itself. It's actually like a little mini biosequesterer, and it actually gets the toxins from a beetle that it eats. And then I think the chemicals are slightly modified by the frog and then exuded from its skin. Which is also a great advert for the importance of biodiversity, because everything's important, even the little beetles. Because pharmaceutical companies are really interested in that frog because it blocks the sodium receptor sites. It could be used for treating irregular heartbeats, and it's being investigated. But if you take the frog out of the jungle, it loses its toxicity, and it's benign because it has to eat its dangerous diet.
There's an awful lot of natural poisons and venoms that have tremendous potential for pharmacology. A lot of them, particularly venoms, tend to be incredibly complex molecules, and they can be used for all sorts of different things. There's a drug on the market at the moment called Capritil, which is another heart drug for hypertension, which comes from the venom of neotropical lanceheads. There's another one for diabetes, which comes from the Gila monster. There's one that has coagulant properties that I think comes from Russell's viper, whose venom achieves something very, very
Who is
similar.
Russell?
I assume he was the naturalist who described it first. Russell's viper is probably the most dangerous snake on Earth. Not that snakes are particularly dangerous to human beings, but because this molecule has evolved over deep time to have, such intense functions in the body of its either prey or things that it's defending itself against, they have tremendous potential for chemists.
Well, Andy, I'll just go to you because we've asked everyone else about the most dangerous animals that they've, and I'm sure that you've probably been to, the rainforests, etc., and done it. What's the thing that you find most kind of initially shocking in another species, or anything that you've had to confront? What do you jump on a chair when you witness?
Not a lot. I mean, we were attacked by a hippo. That was quite spectacular. We made the mistake. We'd made the mistake. Well, I was thinking about what you were saying about, the two animals get locked in an arms race where they each increase. But there is that thing, the other element of deadliness is aggression, isn't it? And, I mean, the reason hippos are the biggest killer in Africa is primarily they're just so aggressive. And like you're saying, they don't need to be that poisonous. I mean, a hippo doesn't need to be as aggressive. We were in a little low-bottom skiff. We were out early in the morning looking at kingfishers, and we came across this herd of hippos that were grazing. And this little lad, he was only about 11, he put the outboard into gear and we went zzz, and we went round. And unfortunately, we ended up with hippos behind us in the water and one very large bull hippo sort of bouncing on the shore and roaring. And this little lad turned to me and he said, "You see that hippo on the shore?" I said, "What, the one that's bouncing up and down and roaring?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "That's the bull hippo." I said, "Right." He said, "You see these ones behind us?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "That's his harem." So I said, is this a good place to be between a bull hippo and a harem? He went, "No." He said, "But it's all right, we'll be all right." He said, because he's scared of the outboard. And at that moment, he revved the outboard as if to make the point. He went, zzz, 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 zzz. And the outboard died, and there was an awful moment of silence, where you could just hear the water lapping against the boat. And then the bull hippo did a sort of double take, where he kind of realised, "Oh, my enemy is dead." And he charged us, and this kid was pulling at the outboard. My wife was taking photographs. She got a brilliant photograph of a hippo with a huge bow wave in front of his head. And luckily, this kid got the outboard going, and the hippo stopped, but it sort of opened his mouth, and they're very big, those tusks, But, I mean, that's an example. It seems to me that in a way, the animals that are very aggressive, like there are some snakes, aren't there, that, and most snakes are shy and they will move away if they hear you coming or if you disturb them. But there are, like, mambas that will chase you, aren't there?
That's a total myth. Total myth.
Right.
No, I mean, I've filmed with mambas lots of times, and generally speaking, what they try and do if they're confronted with a human being is to try and get to somewhere safe.
Right.
And that is usually a hole in the ground, or it's up a tree, or it's into a thicket, and they will move at great speed. They're, in the Guinness Book of Records as being the fastest snake on the planet, straight towards whatever that is, wherever that safety is, and if you are in the way of that, then it might well go towards you. But I've honestly never seen a snake chase a human being or heard a credible story.
But no, because we were talking about this beforehand, about the idea of hardwired fears, that there's a certain talk that the idea that we are born with innate fears to, I think it's falling, darkness and snakes. That a child, even who has had no cultural experience of such of a snake, that apparently there will be, the people who jumped just happened, when they saw anything that looked like a snake, that seems to have gone down. That's been inherited, and we have an innate fear of snakes. And I just wonder, Steve
didn't get that gene then, did he?
No. Well, do you know what? Actually, I mean, arachnophobia is said to be the most common fear across cultures and societies around the world, and something that I have seen incredibly clearly. I did a lot of years where I would go to schools and do animal introductions for kids. And what I would see, without exception, was that if you did a talk for 3, 4, sometimes 5-year-olds and took out a big hairy tarantula out of a box, every single one of them will take that tarantula into their hand, without exception. If you come back at 6, 7, 8 years old, they pick up on the cues from the audience, from the adults around them. So if their teacher goes, "Oh, it's a big hairy spider," then they won't take it into their hand.
Yeah, my little boy, when he was at his fifth birthday party, did that. Big tarantula on his hand, absolutely no problem at all.
It's absolutely true. And yet I think most people would think that is an innate fear. That is something that we have got lurking there in the back of our mind. And it makes sense that we would have innate fears, that, way back in our ancestral past when there were certain things that could genuinely do us damage every single day, whether it's snakes or spiders or darkness or height or deep water, that we would maintain those fears. But in my experience, it doesn't seem to be true of spiders. And spiders, 35 to 50,000 different species of them around the world, only a handful of them even capable of doing any harm to a human being. In Australia, where they have the world's most venomous spiders, in the whole decade of the 1980s, I think there was one person killed by spider bite. Things like the redback spider just never kill people anymore.
But that's because of the availability of medical care, though, isn't it? And,
a lot of it is down to the availability of antivenin, but also that people don't get bitten anything like as much as we think they do. And certainly you can see in the hysteria that easily is generated around wild animals, that we like that sense of the fear and the terror of the natural world, no matter whether it's true or not. I mean, if there is a shark attack in Australia, it will make front-page news here in the UK. We have this image that sharks are a deeply dangerous, terrifying animal, yet fewer than 10 people a year are killed by sharks all around the world. They are of no significant cause to human mortality. But it's exciting to think about a shark attack. It's something that has a grim, sinister, macabre kind of air to it that particularly the media seem to love. And the same is very true of spiders. I mean, we've had an awful lot of hysteria in the British press about spiders of late. Spiders are getting huge. They're getting enormous, massive monster spiders are invading our houses. Black false widow spiders are going to eat us all alive and our limbs are going to rot off. It's all nonsense, but it makes good... It makes good
know
copy.
We're going to cut that just before you say it's all nonsense.
But the sort of false widow, that's the most venomous spider in the UK, is it?
Yeah, I think that's fairly safe to say. But most of what's written about them is nonsense. It's a small, slow-moving spider, pretty inoffensive. They've been around for a long time, for at least 100 years. You'd have to work pretty hard to get bitten by one. And they don't have a necrotizing venom. All this talk of people, losing their limbs to massive, ulcerating, flesh-eating venoms is nonsense. I mean, those are secondary infections that could be anything from a scratch from a bramble to, a nick from a paper cut. But it's certainly not from the venom of the false widow spider.
So books are the real villains then? This is the real... Yes, they are. Books are getting bigger. Wards, government, ombudsman. I still love the fact that most people get their 5-year-old kid a party entertainer like a clown for their do. And you just said, no, just get a tarantula.
Well, no, but it's interesting because I saw that with, as you said, all these 5-year-olds, and they'd all pretty much hold these animals, the big millipedes, the spiders, the lizards, some snakes, absolutely no problem at all.
But that's because they got confident handlers who are handling. They're taking their cue, presumably, from the confident handler, aren't they? That they're saying, oh, well, he looks... I mean, we had one like that where these kids, I remember they laid out in a row on the floor while a python used them as a kind of travelator, which is... I don't think you could get 10 adults to do that, no matter how pissed they were.
Well, something else we wanted to talk about was, which I didn't know anything about today, which is the Schmidt pain index.
Yeah.
Now, this is something I don't know. Well, can you explain a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, there's this guy called...
Schmidt.
Yeah. He's got a fast... And he's like... Basically, he works out of a university in Tucson, Arizona, and he's developed a pain index because he thought it'd be really useful for people to be able to sort of categorise the pain from stinging insects. And he's been stung apparently by 150 in his line of work because he's an entomologist and he specialises in stinging insects. So he's been stung by lots of them. And so he's developed this thing called the Schmidt pain index. He's written scientific papers about it, painstakingly categorising the level of pain for each stinging insect and how it's a fantastic thing. I really do recommend that everybody goes away and Googles it and reads it, because it reads like a fine wine guide or something. Because he sort of says these things like, yes, the fire ant is just like a light breeze on a paper cut, whereas the tarantula wasp is like sticking a live hairdryer into a bath whilst you've been lacerated by razors. So it's sort of like really florid descriptions, the kind of thing Gilly Goulden would do.
But he's not only being bitten and stung by these things, he's then having to go through the experience of getting in a bath with a hairdryer to find out if that's the most good.
I think so, yeah. Anyway, so what's interesting about it is it only goes up to 4. So you'd think so he decided, which I think is quite true, he's got like 150 different stinging insects, but he's chosen to only take his scale up to 4. So there's an awful lot of 1s and 2s and 3s, but there are only 3 4s. And I have to say, I have been bitten by the number 1 4, which I bet Steve has. I bet Steve's story is better than mine. But I'm going to tell you mine anyway, because I've got the mic first. But so, I've been bitten. The bullet ant is number 1, which is this sort of very large ant that hangs around in the jungles of the Amazon. And if you go, I was staying at a scientific field station at the time, and all the biologists there, it's like a rite of passage. Everybody's been stung by a bullet ant. So called because it feels a bit like being shot by a bullet. So inevitably, the day comes where I'm rushing around with these monkey researchers, looking up at the trees, running around, you're not looking where you're going, and I feel this thing goes in my shirt. and then I just think to myself, oh, crap. I really hope that's not the bullet ant. I really hope that's not the bullet ant. And so, I look in and I can see this thing, and it's like stinging, and it's stinging my left breast. And so then, sort of the awfulness of the situation, I had to actually then get my left breast out so that the monkey researchers could use the venom extractor on it.
I'm feeling a bit faint, Robin.
And so they did their best to get the venom out, and I tell you what, it really did hurt, actually. It really, really hurt a lot more than anything else. I'd have given it a 5, quite frankly. But
it's a really interesting venom, the bullet ant venom, though, because bullet ants have massive mandibles, which is what they use for dissecting their prey. They don't use their sting for prey capture at all. It's purely for defence, and it's an almost completely pure neurotoxin. And one of the reasons that people use it for tribal initiation ceremonies, and why biologists would be able to actually be around going, try out a bullet ant sting, it's great, is because although it causes extraordinary pain, it's not dangerous. It's not dangerous at all. It has no allergens. There's almost no danger of a histamine reaction to the venom. It's a venom that has evolved over time purely for use so that a massive, great big animal comes and sticks its snout into a bullet ant's hole, and one single sting is enough to make that big animal never come back again and just totally override its nervous system.
I haven't been back.
No, I'm not surprised.
Neither me nor my breasts have been back, actually.
And with a bullet ant sting, the pain is throughout your whole body. You start shaking, you start sweating. It's completely systemic. It goes through your whole body, and it really does affect your nervous system. Your heart rate goes up, and if you have quite a few of them, you will be passing in and out of consciousness. There will be nothing in your world apart from pain for at least 3 or 4 hours, and that is from an animal that's about the size of a fuse.
But then it just passes, the pain disappears, and there are no...
It disappears completely. You have a massive overdose of adrenaline. You feel fantastic. But no, there's no ill effects, and the chances of being killed by it are next to none.
So is that's your most painful encounter with an animal?
Yeah, my bullet ant sting story was, there's a tribe called the Setere Mawe in Brazil that have an initiation ceremony for their young men to become adults. And so what they do is they take bullet ants, they get hundreds of them, and they anaesthetize them in a sort of plant sap, and then they weave them into a pair of palm gloves with the stingers on the inside. And then the ants wake up, and you put the gloves on for about 10 minutes and dance and get stung hundreds and hundreds of times, and then that is your transition into adulthood. And
and you're using this on Strictly at the moment, or not?
Yes, Robin, yes.
You are an idiot, though, aren't you? I mean, you really are.
It's interesting. I mean, it's almost kind of like that. There's a lot of these initiation ceremonies. I mean, I actually read Jared Diamond said a very interesting thing about things like initiation ceremonies, and they might be something to do with the handicap principle and the whole idea that essentially you've got men showing how potent they can be, that they can still manage to live and still manage to bear progeny despite the fact that they're doing really stupid stuff, like sticking their hands into bullet ant gloves. But this one actually does seem to have a very real effect because, like I said, you have such a massive overdose of adrenaline at the end of it that you feel like a god. I mean, for a week afterwards, I felt like pretty much if I'd leapt off a cliff, I could have flown. And the people think that it makes them better hunters, that it makes them better fishermen, that it makes them better lovers. And so it's become a massive, intrinsic and very important part of their culture.
Did you find you got on people's nerves in that week? because the only reason I said that is because what you described was very like people on cocaine, wasn't it? who always think they've had the most brilliant idea ever, you know, and you sit there thinking you are so boring. You know, I mean, the elation, you know, it's a one-way street, isn't it?
Can we persuade people in the TV industry to swap their previous choice for our new bullet ant gloves? Honestly, you'll come up with something even better than Gogglebox. We have one final question for you, but before that, we always ask our audience a question, the hive mind of the Monkey Cage audience, and today we asked them, what animal would you most like to be killed by and why? So let's find out what we've got. First of all, a hedgehog, because they're awesome.
To be licked to death by 100 golden retriever puppies.
Oh, I've got a worse one, to be licked to death by TV's... Oh, I'm not reading that. An Irukandji jellyfish, a.k.a. the peanut jellyfish, so small you don't even know you've been stung. You fall unconscious after 30 minutes, then appear to have a massive heart attack. Seems like quite a nice way to go if you have to.
We do have some quite weird... A clanger in my sleep.
I'd like it to be a giant panda. They get unnecessary amounts of good press. It's time we found out their true evil. So let's find out. Andy, what would... one animal. Just choose the one animal. What would you like to be killed by?
I think I'd quite like to be killed by a leopard, I think. I don't know why. I just really like leopards. I nearly got a scorpion. My wife Libby, we were in Tanzania, and she was in the bath, and I was lying naked on the bed because it was very humid. And she went, "Andy, can you come here a sec?" And I walked in, and she's a bit short-sighted, Libby, and she was peering over the side of the bath. She said, "What's that?" And I looked at her and said, "Oh, it's a scorpion." She said, "Oh, all right. Oh, I'll stay in the bath," she said. "Can you get rid of it?" "Can you get rid of it?" And I said, "Well, I think I'll go and put some pants on and maybe some shoes," because it's quite a big scorpion. But the trouble was the door opened inwards, so I was reaching over him, and as the door, he got really antsy, and the tail came up, and he was getting quite close. I was thinking, so I got the door half open, naked, with a scorpion, and I'm thinking, I'm not sure what to do. This is not a situation I've encountered in my childhood before. So luckily a Tanzanian soldier was walking past, and he saw me, and I was looking around, and I said, "Got a scorpion, do you know what?" And he just came in massive boots, and he just squished it. And I went, "Thank you very much."
I loved your reasoning when you went, I'll put some pants on, because it was quite a big scorpion. I'd have done it naked with a smaller scorpion, but you know where the bigger ones are more judgmental.
Yeah, it was that old locker room insecurity that came out.
Lucy, you've got close to it with your tears and the tree frog. What was one animal that, if you had...
I think I would choose the Phyllobates terribilis. I'd choose the death that I nearly had, because it would be fast, at least. It's one of the fastest that I can think of.
But you feel so silly, wouldn't you?
Well, not if I hadn't done it by accident. If I'd intentionally done it and I'd eaten one, then I wouldn't feel so foolish.
So it's a very quick sort of Dignitas thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They'd be perfect for Dignitas, actually.
Maybe this is the way to do it.
I thought that. No, it's really interesting, but a couple of morbid people, it's interesting, when I tell that story, they go, oh, that'd be a brilliant way to commit suicide, wouldn't it? And you sort of think, oh, you're dark. I don't know about you.
The frog dignitas.
The Daily Mail are going to go nuts with this. BBC encourage suicide at licence fee payers' expense.
And not even using British frogs, using foreign frogs. Steve, you've come close. What would you like to...
Well, close. I think if I had to choose, it would probably be the venom of the blue-ringed octopus, which is something called tetrodotoxin, and it's described as being almost completely painless. There was one of the very few cases that's been documented of someone being killed by a blue-ringed octopus was a diver who brought one back from a rock pool and placed it into the cleavage of her bikini for a photo. They're very beautiful little octopuses, and it bit her, and she died about 12 hours later without any knowledge of what had happened to her whatsoever. So, yeah, I guess if I was going to go...
And a great Instagram photo as well.
Yeah.
So you want to die wearing a bikini? OK, there's another one for the Daily Mail. Thank you very much to our panel, who've been Steve Batchel, Lucy Cook and Andy Hamilton. As usual, we get sent quite a few emails and letters, and here is one of them. This is from Amy Elvidge. Dear Infinite Monkey Cage, in your show on human uniqueness, someone said that the elephants were unique because of their ability to pick things up with their noses. This isn't true. Tapirs do it too. Also, humans can. I did with pens and stuff. I'm 13. I demonstrated this by sticking a pen up my nose, and my parents got cross. It's like they're not even interested in scientific creativity.
Great. This one is Dear Brian and Robin. I enjoy listening to the Infinite Monkey Cage. I like it when you have songs and when Robin does funny voices and things.
Yeah, there we go, that'll do. I could do your voice. It's wonderful and exciting and mysterious. Oh, I've had another text message. How do they work? It's like magic.
Do you know if the Andromeda Galaxy will collide with our galaxy? And if so, when, please? It's a wonderful letter. It's from Miko Campbell. He's 8 years old. It's fantastic. So the answer is in about 4 billion years. So you're all right, Miko. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening. Thank you to our panel. We hope to see you and hear from you again. Goodbye!
In the infinite monkey cage, without your trousers. In the infinite monkey cage. Now nice again.
Which occurs from the skin secretions of poisoned dart frogs, and in one particular species, Phyllobites terribilis, which is no bigger than the end of my thumb, it's said to have enough poison in one frog to kill 10 people.
But let's see what else you can win.
Hello, my name's Lucy Cook, and I'm a broadcaster and zoologist, and my favourite toxin is the one produced by the slow loris from its elbows, because I think it'd be really cool to have poisonous elbows, particularly on the tube.
Good evening, my name is Andy Hamilton from Fulham, London, England. And my favourite toxin... Actually, I don't like to choose a favourite toxin because I find it causes resentment among the other toxins. But if I had to choose, I think I would go for cyanide because it smells of almonds, which means that Poirot can always smell it. Cyanide is a toxin, is it? Broadly speaking, it's a topic.
Just after the last series that we did, I did go and have a brain scan, which was worrying because I genuinely thought, what if it does turn out that I haven't got one? But as long as I didn't know, it was fine. But on the active observation, you know, kind of a Schrodinger's brain system. And afterwards, I found out that the woman doing the brain scan, this is the only time it's ever happened to me, apparently halfway through the scan, she went, "Oh my God, his brain's so big, I'm not sure I can fit it all in," and then blushed. And that is the only time anything about me has ever made a woman blush. And it turns out I have quite a big occipital lobe. I look at a lot of things. And I'm not showing off, by the way, about having a big brain, because as we know, brain size within a certain range, it doesn't really make much difference. Einstein had a smaller brain than me, but I reckon had the intellectual edge. So, anyway, today we received a memo from the BBC Deputy Assistant Science Facilitator Modulating Ombudsman saying that Brian has been confusing people with his particle physics speech, such as...
Asymptotic freedom!
And could we target a broader demographic who enjoy scary things and contemporary dance? So...
How many more of these have you got, Robin? Can you just get them all out of the way now?
Oh, no, they're going to be scattered
just
through,
pepper
Mr.
them throughout
Tango Man.
the-
So, today's show is called, quite simply, Nature's Most Frightening Things. Cha-cha-cha.
Actually, that's almost true. Today we're looking for nature's most deadly animal.
Is it sharks?
No.
Oh.
Why is it that at times we seem to be petrified of the innocuous and unaware of the truly deadly? What are the most astounding and ingenious methods of survival that have evolved by the process of mutation, heredity, and natural selection?
We are joined by two people who, for some insane reason, constantly confront a barrage of fanged, stinging, poisonous, toxic, deadly creatures, and a comedian who sometimes gives Sandy Toxfig a piggyback. And they are...
My name's Steve Backshaw. I am a naturalist, and my favourite toxin is dendrobatotoxin.
Hello, I'm Robin Ince.
And I'm Brian Cox.
And welcome to the podcast version of The Infinite Monkey Cage, which contains extra material that wasn't considered good enough for the radio. Enjoy it.
Hello, I'm Brian Cox.
And I'm Robin Ince, and this is The Infinite Monkey Cage.
The show described by one disgruntled blogger as one of those shows that thinks you can prove anything with facts and evidence.
Genuinely true.
And presented by someone described as so-called professor.
Brian Cox. So, and he is, by the way, just so you know, he is so-called Professor Brian Cox, because he is Professor. And as you probably realise already, he is very much the brains of the operation, while I'm the not
the John
brains.
Peel
Well, I'd say I'm the
impersonator.
not brains, really, of the operation. That's my
You do
my
great
main job.
impressions, though.
I can do Mr. Magoo being Richard Feynman. I got a friend who's an artist, and sometimes says something I don't agree with too well. He says, I, as an artist, when I see a flower, yeah, there we go. That's not the flower at all. Yeah.
Seamlessly got out of that.
Today, in fact, even though I am the not brains, by the way, I just have to quickly tell...
Toxin, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it's a poison, not a venom, which is...
No.
Oh, don't worry, Steve. We'll be dealing with the old toxic venom conundrums in a moment. But let's first say, and this is our panel. Well, Steve, we'll start with you. And first of all, obviously, this show is actually being pre-recorded by some months, so congratulations on winning Strictly Come Dancing. Coming third is Strictly Come Dancing, coming fifth and being knocked out in the first round. So one of those will work in the edit. What is this is the only thing I'm going to ask about the dance competition, but what is the difference between the feeling of fear, where, you know, when I watch you on television and you are approaching, you know, taipan snake, it's certainly one of the most poisonous snakes, the difference between that and then the going in front of people and dancing, you know, which one actually makes you feel more nervous and more nauseous?
It sounds absolutely ludicrous, but there's no comparison. It's the dancing by a mile. I'm far, far less